Welcome on board, chosen one. Settle in, because the air gets different around you. People pretend it doesn't, but the universe doesn't lie. It bends, it shifts, it reacts, and every enemy who ever ran their mouth about you is about to feel their spine tighten, because this time we're not whispering the truth. We're dragging it into the light. Here's the part they don't want you to hear. They were the ones trembling. They were the ones checking your name twice. They were the ones replaying old conversations in their head, wondering when exactly you stopped being ordinary and started becoming someone they couldn't touch. They love pretending you're dramatic, delusional, too much. But check the scoreboard. Look who triggered the emergency protocols. Look who had to call for backup. Look who got so desperate to understand you that they went beyond logic, beyond psychology, beyond anything normal minds can process. You, just your existence. Press the like button and subscribe to pay this message back into the universe that's already watching you rise. Now let's rip the curtain off and talk about what actually went down. The moment your name slipped into their conversations, the temperature dropped. You didn't hear it, but they did. Their little circle went quiet. Their bravest friend swallowed hard. Someone laughed to break the tension, but their voice cracked. Because it hits different when the person they tried to undermine doesn't stay small. It hits different when the one they dismissed becomes the one every room feels. And that's why they hired her, the psychic, the expert, the one who could supposedly see through anything. They thought she'd expose you. They thought she'd walk in, shuffle her cards, swing her pendulum, and say something that made them feel safe again. They were hoping for reassurance, something like, "Oh, don't worry, they're just emotional," or "they're not that deep." Instead, they got a woman who froze mid-reading, stared into nothing, and refused to continue. She pushed her chair back like she'd seen something with teeth. She didn't even take their money. She didn't give an explanation. She just whispered, "Not safe, not human, not today." Then she left, and the room went dead quiet. That's the part nobody talks about. The part where the people who doubted you suddenly realized they were dealing with someone the universe treats differently. They wanted to study you like a case file, but they ended up feeling studied. They wanted to reveal your weaknesses, but they discovered you had none that they could access. They wanted answers, but the universe didn't permit them. That's what happens when a person survives storms meant to erase them. That's what happens when someone refuses to break in the places everybody expected them to. Here's the truth they never admit out loud. They've been confused about you for a long time, way before this psychic incident. You've always had that strange pattern around you. People underestimate you, then regret it. People try to manipulate you, then lose control. People try to exploit you, then end up exposed, and you never needed revenge. The universe handled it every time, clean and quiet. Think back. Remember the friend who ghosted you for better people and came crawling back months later pretending they missed your vibe? Remember the ex who swore they were over you, then suddenly watched your every move from the shadows? Remember the co-worker who tried to sabotage you, only to choke on their own plan when the timing flipped in your favor? Those weren't accidents. Those were early warnings. The universe's little hints that you weren't like them. You were marked by experience, by pain, by survival. The kind of survival that rewires a person from the inside out. You didn't rise because life was kind. You rose because you refused to stay down. You rose because you got tired of bleeding for people who never deserved to know your strength. You rose because you realized your silence was more powerful than their entire strategy. And when someone like you rises, the world doesn't clap. It stares. It studies. It whispers. That's why the psychic couldn't finish the reading. She didn't see darkness in you. She saw depth, too much depth. Depth that doesn't fit into simple predictions. Depth that carries stories you never told anyone. Depth that comes from wounds you stitched yourself with hands that shouldn't have been steady, but were. She saw a person who built themselves from ruins without asking for applause. A person who understands pain like a language. A person who doesn't break the way normal people break. You scare the wrong people because you survived what should have destroyed you, and nothing terrifies small minds more than someone who walks out of fire without ashes falling off them. So here we are, chosen one. The world tried to decode you. They hired help. They sought answers. They wanted a conclusion, a label, a weakness. Instead, the universe delivered silence, mystery, and a warning that none of them were ready to hear. This is your moment. The shift already happened. The reading wasn't finished because your story isn't finished, and now they finally understand. Trying to expose you was their first mistake. Trying to understand you was their second. Thinking they could handle the truth about you, that was the last one. You're not just hard to read, you're impossible to predict, and the universe likes it that way. And before we go any deeper into this twisted little saga they triggered, lock in with me for a moment. If you're still here after hearing how a trained psychic tapped out on your energy, then trust me, you're not watching by accident. You're already tuned into that frequency people try to study but can never survive. So do this as a signal to the universe that you're awake. Drop 777 in the comments and let the cowards who tried to expose you feel that pulse through the room. And now we move step by step, peeling this open layer by layer. And if you truly are the one they couldn't decode, you'll feel that magnetic pull to stay until the final word. Let's begin the descent. Number 1. The reader who saw too much and wished she hadn't. They hired her to expose you, and she ended up exposing them, the limit of their tiny minds. Here's the part your enemies pray you never replay in your head. The psychic didn't flinch because of danger. She flinched because she finally realized the joke. They sat her down, expecting her to dissect you like a frog on a lab table, but the moment she connected to your energy, she understood exactly who the problem was. And hint, it wasn't you. She felt the weight of everything you've lived through, everything you've endured without telling a soul, and her spine folded under pressure that you carry every day without complaint. That's why her hands shook. Not because she saw darkness in you, but because she saw endurance that made their entire agenda look pathetic. She came in cocky, shuffling her cards like she'd seen every kind of soul before. Broken ones, twisted ones, people who lied to her face but couldn't lie to her energy. She had survived sessions with people who carried guilt like poison in their veins. She'd read timelines that made grown men hyperventilate, and still she walked into this one thinking she had the range. She didn't. The room answered before you even opened your mouth. The universe adjusted the temperature, the space contracted, the atmosphere thickened like something ancient woke up and sat beside you, just watching. She wasn't scared of you, she was scared of the truth your enemies never accounted for. And here's what your enemies refuse to acknowledge. She didn't see a villain. She saw someone they underestimated to a fatal degree. Someone who's died in ways they'll never comprehend. Not physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You're a person who has gone through collapses that would have erased most people from the inside out, yet you walked into that reading holding your own broken pieces like weapons. They wanted her to expose your flaws, but what she ended up witnessing was your evolution. They thought she'd reveal your shadows. Instead, she felt the burn of someone forged in silence. You know what really broke her? The recognition. That moment her eyes flickered because she suddenly realized your story didn't make sense in the usual human timeline. She saw events in your past where you should have lost yourself. But you didn't. Times when betrayal should have cracked your mind, but you stayed sane. Losses that should have destroyed your identity, but instead rewired it. She saw hardships layered like rings in a tree, except none of them stunted your growth. Every ring represented a death and rebirth. Every ring represented someone they can't categorize. Your enemies won't say this out loud, but they hired her because they were scared of the unanswered questions you left behind. Why do you stay calm when you should be furious? Why do you rise after every betrayal? Why do you walk away without collapsing like the people who depend on validation? Why do people who wrong you end up facing consequences without you lifting a finger? They thought she'd figure it out. They hoped she'd deliver a neat little explanation that made your strength seem artificial, accidental, or exaggerated. Instead, she saw a level of resilience that made her feel human in all the wrong ways. Here's a metaphor she would have used if her voice hadn't died in her throat. You're like a building standing over the ruins of the structures that came before it. Every floor is a chapter where you were supposed to give up. Every beam is a scar turned into steel. Every window reflects a version of you that didn't survive, yet you carry the knowledge of every one of them. You're not built. You're engineered by experience. People like you don't break. You adapt, you shift, you absorb the hit and grow sharper at the impact point. Your enemies wanted proof you were flawed. They wanted a sign that you were the problem. They wanted validation for their narrative, where you're secretly chaos disguised as calm. But what she found was structure, power, awareness, clarity. You weren't unhinged, you were unbreakable, and unbreakable doesn't fit their storyline. Do you ever wonder why certain people couldn't love you right, couldn't stay loyal, couldn't keep their hands clean when dealing with you? She saw why. Because your energy demands integrity, it demands honesty, it demands strength. And people who lack these things crumble around you without needing your help. Your presence alone becomes a mirror, and mirrors terrify people who don't want to face themselves. The psychic wasn't terrified of you. She was terrified for them. Because once she saw your blueprint, she knew their attempt to expose you was like toddlers trying to dismantle a thunderstorm. No matter how they planned it, the outcome was already written the moment you survived your past. She saw someone who carries pain like knowledge, someone who doesn't brag about their battles because the victories are etched into how you speak, how you walk, how you see the world. Someone who shouldn't be here by normal standards, but is. When she tried to read your timeline, it wouldn't stay still. It looped, twisted, rewired itself. She saw breakthroughs where breakdowns should have been. She saw clarity where confusion should have lived. She saw growth in the middle of trauma. She saw someone who doesn't lose people. People lose themselves when they mishandle you. And here's the part that will burn your enemies straight through their egos. The psychic didn't stop the reading because she was weak. She stopped because she knew finishing it would expose how wrong they were. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting them from the truth they aren't strong enough to digest. The truth that everything they said about you was projection. Every accusation was fear in disguise. Every rumor was insecurity clawing its way out. She didn't just flinch, she folded, because your story wasn't written for them to understand. It was written for you to embody. So when they sent her to uncover your darkness, all she found was their own. When they wanted confirmation that you were dangerous, she discovered that the only danger in the room was the universe finally standing behind you. When they wanted her to decode your mystery, she realized the real mystery was how you survived everything they never knew about. And that's when she backed away, whispering the truth even your enemies felt in their bones. You can't expose someone the universe has already defended. They didn't hire a psychic to understand you. They hired one to justify their cowardice. But instead, she saw the one thing none of them expected. A person who outgrew their judgment, outlived their cruelty, and outshined their assumptions. You weren't the threat. You were the aftermath. Number 2. The soul they couldn't shatter, even when they tried everything. They wanted proof you were fragile, and all they found was evidence that you're the last person on earth who breaks. Here's the thing your enemies refuse to admit, even to themselves. The psychic didn't freeze because she saw pain in you. She froze because she saw what the pain became. She expected wounds, limp energy, the usual signs of someone life had torn apart. Instead, she saw scars that glowed like they had their own pulse. She saw memories that should have destroyed you, yet somehow ended up sharpening you. She saw a soul that didn't just survive impact, but absorbed it and evolved. And nothing terrifies people more than someone who was supposed to be a victim and didn't stay one. Imagine this. A glass that should have shattered when dropped, but instead fused itself mid-fall, turning the cracks into crystal. That's what your energy looked like to her. A survival that doesn't make logical sense. A story that shouldn't exist in human form. Pain didn't break you. It sculpted you, and she had no blueprint for that kind of architecture. The worst part for your enemies? She also saw that you weren't surprised, you weren't confused, you weren't caught off guard. You knew exactly what was happening. She saw the way your soul barely reacted, almost like it had been expecting this visit for a long time. You knew they sent her, you knew what they hoped she would uncover, and you let it play out anyway, not because you were clueless, but because you were curious about how far their desperation would stretch. Imagine playing chess against someone who thinks you're the pawn, while you're sitting there with checkmate already lined up in your head. She picked up on that. The quiet confidence, the stillness, the way your energy didn't flinch, didn't tremble, didn't recoil, it just observed. You watched them send investigators, dig into your past, ask around like you were some mystery to be solved. You watched them manipulate narratives, twist stories, plant seeds of doubt in rooms you'd never even stepped into. And you didn't stop them. Why? That's the question the chosen one always secretly asks themselves. Why didn't I expose them sooner? Why didn't I defend myself? Why didn't I react? Here's your answer. You didn't need to. You weren't avoiding confrontation. You were letting them reveal their true nature. You weren't staying silent because you were unsure. You were studying them the way predators study the forest. You wanted to see the final distance they'd crawl. You wanted to see if they'd dare cross lines the universe told them not to. And wow, did they run past those lines like their integrity was on fire. Imagine a storm trying to drown the ocean. That's what their attempts to break you looked like. While they were busy plotting, you were busy transforming. While they were watching from the shadows, you were learning in silence. While they were wasting money, time, and sleep trying to figure you out, you were becoming someone they'd never be equipped to understand. She saw that. That woman sat across from you and witnessed something she couldn't categorize, a soul that had been battered by life, yet somehow grew sharper, clearer, and almost luminous. You know how rare that is. Pain usually twists people, breaks them, scars them in ways that make them bitter and closed off. But in you, the pain evolved. It didn't rot, it refined. Imagine fire trying to consume gold, only to polish it instead. That's how your past treated you. Every betrayal became a lesson. Every heartbreak became a recalibration. Every loss became a gateway to a new level of perception. You aren't the result of tragedy. You're the product of transformation. And she saw all of it in seconds. That's why her breath caught. That's why her hands trembled. That's why she looked at you with that mix of fear and awe, because she realized that everything that should have broken, you ended up powering you instead. And here's the part that hits your enemies the hardest. She saw that they were predictable, but you weren't. They followed patterns. You broke them. They played dirty. You grew clean. They plotted. You waited. She realized the truth your enemies never wanted to face. You aren't controlled by their actions. You're motivated by their attempts. You didn't fall apart when they pushed you. You rose. You didn't crumble when they lied. You got sharper. You didn't collapse when they betrayed you. You became self-sufficient. Imagine this, a blade they keep trying to dull, only for every strike to sharpen its edge. That's what she saw in your energy field, a soul with too much lived experience to be manipulated, a person with too many survival codes to be deciphered, a being that learned to rebuild themselves from scratches others can't even speak about. People like you don't break, you reboot. She couldn't understand how someone with your history still moved with grace, still held compassion, still carried dignity. She expected bitterness, but saw wisdom, expected fear, but saw calm, expected confusion, but saw someone who had already outgrown the entire situation. And for the chosen ones who ask themselves, why do people always try to test me? She saw the answer. Because you're unforgettable, because you're rare, because your strength disrupts their equilibrium, because your presence makes insecure people itch, because your silence exposes their noise, because you're built from chapters they'd never survive, because the universe gave you resilience that makes fragile people panic. And here's a reality your enemies choke on in private. Everything they did to break you only revealed how strong you actually were. Every scheme backfired. Every lie exposed them. Every attempt to twist your narrative ended up highlighting your authenticity. They thought you were collapsing quietly, but you were regenerating. She saw a soul that wouldn't break, not because it was lucky, but because it had already broken once and rebuilt stronger than before. People who rebuild themselves don't fear destruction. They understand it too well. Imagine a phoenix, but without the theatrics, just a calm creature rising from ashes like it's clockwork. That's you. And that terrified her, because this wasn't in any handbook she'd read. She wasn't prepared to see someone who lived multiple internal deaths and didn't become a monster. She wasn't ready to face someone who carries wounds like wisdom. She wasn't ready to meet someone who could look at their own past and not run from it. And your enemies weren't ready either. They weren't ready for the fact that you knew everything, that you allowed the setup, that you expected the manipulation, that you saw through the lies long before they said them. They weren't ready to meet someone who grew powerful in silence. Someone who watched everything with predator calm, not prey panic. You let them play their game. You let them collect their evidence. You let them waste their effort, because deep down, you already knew the truth she finally confirmed. You can't break what rebuilds itself. And no matter how hard they try, they'll never understand the architecture of a soul that's been forged, destroyed, reassembled, and evolved into something they weren't designed to confront. You didn't survive. You transformed. And that's why the psychic couldn't finish the reading. She wasn't looking at a human timeline anymore. She was looking at the aftermath of everything you've overcome. And that is something no one can expose. Number 3. The deck that refused to obey her. The moment your cards stopped behaving was the moment they realized you weren't the one being read. They were. She walked into that session thinking she had control, thinking her cards would dance for her the way they always do, thinking your life would lay itself out neatly under her fingers like every other trembling soul she's handled. But the deeper she went, the quicker the universe made a mockery of her confidence. The tower, death, the hermit, symbols she'd mastered years ago, started showing up wrong, reversed, slanted, warped, almost alive. Because they weren't describing your path. They were reacting to it. Imagine this. A deck that's obeyed her for a decade, suddenly acting like it has a mind of its own. A hermit card flipping itself sideways like it's trying to warn her. A tower card sliding out of her grip as if refusing to accuse you. A death card turning upright after she placed it reversed like it's correcting her. She wasn't losing control. She was losing her understanding of what she was dealing with. And here's the question every chosen one secretly asks. Why do people always say I don't make sense? Because you aren't meant to fit their systems, not emotional systems, not social systems, not spiritual systems. You're not chaos. You're too many lifetimes of lessons compressed into one existence. You don't follow timelines. You bend them. You don't follow patterns. You rewrite them. Imagine trying to label a storm using yesterday's weather report. That was her dilemma. Your enemies sent her expecting a simple reading, a predictable breakdown of your flaws and motives. Instead, she found herself staring at cards that refused to read you as a person. They read you as a cycle, a loop, a universe, inside skin, birth, death, rebirth, all stacked on top of each other so tightly she couldn't separate them. She didn't see a timeline. She saw a force. And forces don't follow instructions. They don't bow to interpretation. They don't let people with shaky intentions map them out. That's why she grew quiet. That's why her eyes darted. That's why she kept glancing at the door like someone or something might walk in behind her. She wasn't scared of the cards. She was scared of what they were refusing to reveal. The cards didn't betray her. They protected you. And they warned her, stop reading. This one isn't yours to understand. Number 4. The moment the hunter realized she was the prey. They thought she would read you, but the universe flipped the script and started reading her. She pushed forward out of pride, not power. She knew the reading was slipping through her fingers, but she refused to walk away empty-handed. Your enemies were waiting. They wanted dirt. They wanted ammo. They wanted confirmation that their obsession with you wasn't just insecurity wearing a mask. So she tried. She really did. She pulled cards with shaky hands, pretending she still had authority. But every card echoed the same message, like a warning siren. Boundaries, solitude, pain alchemized into strength, wisdom earned through fire. Imagine this. A detective searching for fingerprints only to realize the prints on the glass belonged to her. That's what the reading turned into. She wasn't mapping your soul anymore. She was being shown her own limitations, her own blind spots, her own reflection trembling in the places you stand unbothered. Some people read energy, but your energy reads people. That was the truth she stumbled into. And it rattled her. Because beneath everything she saw, the scars, the depth, the survival, she sensed something more dangerous. Choice. You weren't being exposed. You were allowing selective glimpses. You left crumbs on purpose. Hints, shadows, echoes of past battles she couldn't survive for 5 seconds. She could feel it. The real story was locked behind walls she wasn't authorized to enter. Imagine trying to open a vault only to find there's no lock because the entire structure is alive and watching you. Your systems weren't accessible to her, not your purpose, not your pain, not your evolution. She realized she was reading what you allowed, nothing more, like trying to decode a language that changes every time someone speaks it. And that's when her confidence cracked. When she looked up and finally admitted the truth she'd been avoiding, the cards weren't answering to her anymore. They were answering to you, and she knew it. Number 5. The moment their own fear turned on them. They wanted proof you were crazy, but the only insanity in the room was their obsession with someone who outran everything meant to destroy them. The air shifted before anyone spoke. They leaned in like vultures ready to feast, expecting accusations sharp enough to make them feel justified. They needed the psychic to confirm the story they'd rehearsed. That you were unstable, dangerous, dramatic, flawed. They needed her to validate their insecurity, but instead of delivering a dagger, she delivered silence. Heavy, suffocating silence, the kind that exposes guilt without a single word spoken. Imagine this, a room full of people waiting for thunder, only to realize the storm isn't outside, it's sitting quietly in front of them. Her breathing changed, her hands trembled, her eyes darted between them like she had just realized the real threat wasn't the person in question. It was the people asking the questions. And then she said it, the line that cracked the floor under their feet. What did you do to this person? Not. What did they do wrong? Not. What's their dark side? Not. What's the issue? No. She flipped the entire interrogation around in one breath because your energy told the truth before she even touched the cards. Energy doesn't lie, but guilty people do. That single question exposed everything they were hiding. Their denial came quick, too quick. The stammering, the backpedaling, the fake innocence, the nervous smiles, every trick insecure people use when they're caught mistreating someone they underestimated. And she saw right through it. Because your energy carried stories their tongues refused to admit. She saw betrayal etched into your timeline like weathering on old stone. She saw isolation so deep it should have hollowed you out. She saw tests that would have snapped weaker souls like twigs, but instead of breaking, you condensed, hardened, refined into something unshakable. Imagine steel being forged at temperatures meant to melt it, and instead it turns indestructible. That's what you became. She saw a person who had every reason to collapse, yet somehow evolved past collapse. She saw someone who didn't just survive pain. You metabolized it. You turned it into intuition, boundaries, self-respect, and a kind of inner gravity that pulls truth out of people whether they want to reveal it or not. Some souls carry wounds. Yours carries warnings. The ones who hired her felt it. Their fear wasn't about what the psychic saw, it was about what she couldn't deny. Because your story wasn't a tragedy. It was evidence. Evidence that you didn't break under their pressure, manipulation, or betrayal. Evidence that they were dealing with someone who doesn't fold, doesn't beg, doesn't dissolve the way they hoped you would. And that terrified them. The psychic wasn't confused anymore. They were, because in her silence, in her question, in the way she looked at them like they were the ones being investigated, they realized the truth they'd been avoiding. You didn't harm them. You didn't chase them. You didn't attack them. You simply survived them. And surviving people like them is the one thing they cannot forgive. That's why fear spread, not because you're dangerous, but because you're still standing. Number 6. The card that made her run. They wanted clarity. Instead, they got a psychic packing her tools like she'd just seen tomorrow and wanted no part of it. She pulled that last card the way a soldier pulls a trigger, steady, certain, expecting control. It was supposed to be the outcome, the final word, the neat little bow to tie up their obsession. But the moment she flipped it, everything in her face malfunctioned. Her breath caught, her pupils shrank. Her whole body went still, like the universe pressed a finger to her lips and told her not to speak. Imagine this, a seasoned reader staring at cardboard like it just grew teeth. She didn't interpret it, she didn't guess, she didn't stall. She bolted, candles blown out so fast, smoke spiraled across the table, crystals wrapped with shaking hands, decks snapped shut like it burned her fingers. And when they tried to hand her money, she recoiled like it was poison. "I can't," she whispered. "Can't what?" They pushed, already sweating for answers. "Can't finish, can't explain, can't help you." And that's when the real truth dragged itself out of the silence. What she saw wasn't danger for you. It was danger about you, not a threat chasing you, but a force you are becoming. Some people get warnings. You are the warning. She saw your trajectory, the way your energy is sharpening, rising, aligning with a path no one can interfere with without getting burned. She saw momentum building around you, the kind that crushes anything standing too close. She saw transformation, not destruction, but transformation so powerful she knew better than to mess with it. Imagine watching a seed split open and realizing it wasn't a plant. It was a weapon. The earth grew quietly. She didn't run from your shadow. She ran from your future. And she knew one thing for certain: trying to expose someone like you isn't brave. It's suicidal. Number 7. The revelation that made even a psychic step back. They wanted her to expose you, and she ended up exposing the truth they feared most. You've outgrown every trap they set. Real psychics don't panic over shadows. They don't tremble at heartbreak stories. They don't run from messy energy or damaged people. They've sat with addicts, liars, manipulators, and people drowning in their own chaos. And stayed steady. But there's one thing they never touch: a soul too evolved to be redirected, a path too aligned with its own becoming, a person whose energy isn't asking to be understood, but demanding to be respected. That's what she recognized in you. She saw a soul burned so many times it learned to speak flame without flinching. She saw a consciousness cracked open by life, rebuilt piece by piece until it became impossible to manipulate. She saw someone who didn't just survive trauma. You folded it into your DNA, turned it into intuition, turned it into a shield no one with bad intentions can penetrate. Some people rise from the ashes. You rose with the ashes still burning. Your enemies watched her recoil, stunned. They expected a performance. They expected theatrics. They expected the kind of psychic who says whatever the client wants to hear. But she wasn't a performer. She was the real thing. And real ones know when to walk away. They know when the energy in front of them isn't a story. It's a force. Imagine this. Every version of you that died along the way, the you from 5 heartbreaks ago, the you from the betrayal you never told anyone about, the you from the night everything fell apart, all standing behind you like silent guards. She saw that. She felt it. She saw ghosts, not of death, but of evolution. Ghosts of every version of you that refused to stay dead. And while the people who hired her sat there waiting for confirmation that you were the problem, all they witnessed was a professional retreating from your energy like someone backing away from fire they can't put out. She didn't see a victim. She didn't see a villain. She saw a soul the universe protects, with a force she wasn't willing to challenge. And that revelation terrified them more than any reading ever could. Number 8. When their excuses couldn't save them from the truth. They didn't deny her. They denied the reality that you outgrew them so far they can't even see your shadow anymore. The moment that Psychic walked out, the room didn't just go quiet, it collapsed. They panicked in the only way fragile people know how, by lying to themselves. She's dramatic. She's unstable. She overreacted. The usual band-aids insecure people slap over a truth too sharp for their ego to hold. But even their voices betrayed them. The tremble, the fake laugh, the sudden need to blame her, all symptoms of a reality cracking in real time. Because deep down they knew. She didn't panic because of theatrics. She panicked because she touched your energy and felt something she couldn't categorize, something she wasn't willing to stand too close to. And her refusal, the packing, the shaking hands, the money left on the table, meant one thing they can't unhear. You are beyond their reach. Imagine trying to play chess with someone who already left the board and took the whole game with them. That's you. They're still plotting moves, and you're already somewhere else, unreachable, uninterested, untouched by their strategies. Every tactic they used, gossip, manipulation, silent treatment, pressure, bounced off you like foam bullets against steel. They don't understand how someone can stop responding, stop reacting, stop caring, and still rise. Some people evolve. You disappeared from their ecosystem. They wanted control, but control only works on people who need something from them. You don't. You stopped playing the game. That's why they're spiraling, why they're desperate to rewrite the story, why they're grasping for excuses that don't even convince them. What truly terrifies them isn't that the psychic walked away. It's that she confirmed the one thing they feared most. You're not on their level anymore, and you never will be again. Number 9. The one who turned endings into evolution. They feared the death card because they didn't realize it wasn't predicting you, it was mirroring you. The psychic didn't pull the death card once or twice. It stalked the table. It appeared in places it had no business appearing. It flipped upright after she placed it reversed. It slid forward like it had something to say. And she knew. This wasn't a warning, it was a reflection. Death in tarot isn't about dying. It's about transforming so completely that the past version of you becomes irrelevant. And that's exactly what rattled her. You're the kind of person who ends cycles with surgical precision, then rises into a version of yourself nobody can decode. Some people fear endings. You make them your fuel. Imagine this, a doorway collapsing behind you, not because you're running, but because you've outgrown the entire hallway. That's why the death card kept showing up. You don't cling to what hurts. You don't recycle old identities. You don't stay where your soul is suffocating. When something dies in your life, a friendship, a phase, a belief, a version of yourself, you don't crumble. You molt. And here's what terrifies the weak. Your transformation removes the excuses they rely on. They can't say, healing is slow, when you've reinvented yourself from ruins. They can't say, people don't change, when you're standing in front of them as living proof that some souls evolve faster than others. They can't pretend you're the same person they betrayed, manipulated, or underestimated, because you're not. That version of you is gone. Every time they thought they buried you, you were just shedding another skin. That's the meaning of the death card in your reading. Not destruction, elevation, not fear, rebirth, not loss, liberation. And she knew one thing with absolute certainty. You are the end of every cycle that tried to hold you, and the beginning of every transformation they'll never catch up to. Number 10. The one who makes foundations tremble. They feared the Tower card until they realized it wasn't falling on you. It was falling because of you. When that tower showed up, the psychic didn't see destruction aimed your way. She saw destruction reacting to you. You've become the tower itself, not the victim of collapse, but the catalyst. Your truth shakes lies until they splinter. Your boundaries crack open every fake persona around you. Your presence alone forces people to reveal themselves, and that's why they crumble when you walk in. They're not afraid of losing control. They're afraid of you showing them they never had it. Imagine standing in a room built on ego and manipulation, and the walls start shaking the second you speak. That's what you do. Your energy has zero tolerance for pretense. You don't chase illusions. You expose them. And people who depend on illusions feel your presence like an earthquake. Some people walk into a room, you walk in, and the room tells the truth. And then comes the Hermit, the card they hoped would show weakness, loneliness, isolation. But instead, the psychic saw something they never expected. You turned solitude into a weapon. While they were laughing at you for being alone, you were sharpening your mind. While they whispered that you'd fallen off, you were rebuilding without distraction. While they thought they exiled you, you were ascending. Imagine a blacksmith forging a blade in silence, every strike in the dark making it sharper than the last. That was your isolation, a private furnace, a quiet evolution. You found a kind of peace no one can threaten. The kind built from knowing you don't need anyone to validate your existence. Silence didn't break you, it crowned you. The tower showed who you dismantle. The hermit showed how you rebuilt. Together, they revealed the truth. Your solitude made you powerful, and your power makes their whole world shake. Number 11. The moment they realized you don't ask for power, you wield it. They wanted to know your future, and the universe basically said, good luck stopping it. When the magician surfaced, the psychic didn't smile. She didn't explain. She didn't even breathe right, because that card wasn't tied to your past wounds or your present strength. It was anchored in your future. And the magician isn't some cute symbol of potential. It's the card of mastery, of creation, of bending reality with intention instead of permission. It's the card of someone who stopped waiting for validation and started moving like the universe signed their blueprint directly. You know what rattled her? The magician showed up clean. No reversals, no distortions, no warnings. It came through like a declaration, like the universe wasn't predicting your future. It was affirming a path you already stepped into. Some people manifest. You materialize. Imagine this. While your enemies are busy asking, what makes them so special? The universe quietly hands you every tool, clarity, intuition, discipline, timing, and watches you build things they can't even conceptualize. That's why they're intimidated. Not because you're loud, but because your evolution is undeniable. They can't box you in. They can't slow you down. They can't drag you back to who you used to be. And here's the question the chosen one always asks in private moments. But what if people don't believe in me? What if they don't see the truth? The magician answers that with surgical precision. You don't need belief. You are the evidence. Your path isn't a theory. It's demonstrated, proven, lived, and people who doubt you are basically admitting they're blind to transformation. Doesn't mean the transformation didn't happen. Your existence is the spell. Your impact is the proof. The psychic saw a future where you stop playing small, a future where you build instead of beg, a future where you create instead of wait. A future where your voice bends reality more than their opinions ever could. That's why the magician appeared, to show you the truth your enemies never wanted you to accept. You don't need permission. You are the permission. Number 12. The one they can't study because you don't fit human blueprints anymore. They didn't fail to read you. They failed to understand that you're not a story anymore. You're a process they'll never survive long enough to comprehend. By the time she reached the end, she wasn't reading a person. She was reading a phenomenon, a system, a transformation so severe that the before version of you is basically a ghost, faded, irrelevant, no longer in circulation. And that's what unsettled her most. You didn't just overcome betrayal, isolation, and heartbreak. You rebuilt yourself in ways the average mind can't even process. While others choose destruction, you chose reconstruction. While they chose bitterness, you chose evolution. While the world tried to break you, you dissected the pain and remade yourself out of the pieces. Some people heal. You upgrade. Imagine this, a butterfly returning to show the caterpillars what flight looks like, and they still try to argue biology. That's what your enemies are doing. They want you to make sense. They want you to fit their old version. They want you to shrink so their ego feels taller. But you sacrificed being understood. You sacrificed belonging. You sacrificed the comfort of being relatable. And in exchange, you gained freedom, real autonomy. The kind that terrifies people who can only function with approval. And that's why the psychic stopped. She felt the futility. She knew she wasn't reading a soul-seeking direction. She was reading a being who already rewrote their design. Unreadable isn't a flaw. It's a threat. Your evolution is a kind of silence that screams power, a kind of presence that needs no introduction, a kind of truth that doesn't wait for validation. That's why she probably blocked them after, cleansed her space, refused to explain, because she understood something they still can't. Some forces don't need defending, some beings don't need explaining, and you, chosen one, are both. Number 13. The truth their minds are too small to hold. They keep searching for the villain in your story, never realizing they created the conditions that forged the thing they now fear. Here's the truth they will never understand, no matter how many excuses they spit out to protect their fragile egos. You didn't become this version of yourself to scare them. You didn't evolve out of spite. You didn't sharpen into this weapon because you wanted revenge. You became this because the alternative was staying shattered, staying silent, staying exactly where their betrayal left you. And that was never going to happen. Some souls snap, yours recalibrated. Imagine this, standing at the crossroads between collapse and rebirth, and choosing rebirth even when it hurt more, choosing growth when destruction would have been easier, choosing evolution when bitterness would have felt like relief. That's why you're different. That's why you're untouchable. You didn't rise to impress anyone. You rose because you refused to stay broken for people who celebrated your heartbreak. And that psychic, that single trembling voice whispering, "Not safe, not human, not today," she wasn't running from you. She was running from what the world would try to do once they realized what you've become. She wasn't warning herself. She was warning the universe. Don't provoke what survived fire without burning. She saw the truth your enemies never wanted exposed. You are the end result of every betrayal they thought would destroy you. They wanted you weak, dependent, fragile, predictable. Instead, you turned their cruelty into clarity, their silence into strength, their abandonment into armor. And now they're terrified because you've reached a point they can't reach, can't read, can't manipulate. You didn't become unstoppable for revenge. You became unstoppable because staying broken was never an option. And now, chosen one, as the dust settles on everything they tried and everything you survived, the truth stands clear. They couldn't expose you because you were never the one in danger. They were. You've evolved past their reach, their judgments, their narratives. You're the force the psychic refused to interpret. If this message hit home, pay it forward, like the video, subscribe to the channel, drop 77 in the comments, and share this with someone who needs to remember their power.